Hi, this is Erica Merrill, and I'm the founder of Perfect Legal Video. I'm very excited to have with us today Attorney Nicole Reeves Lavallee. She owns a real estate and family law firm in the Worcester area, and we are very fortunate to have her with us every week discussing topics in these areas. This week, we're going to be talking about real estate, and we're going to be talking about multi-family dwelling units, whether you should buy them or not, and what are the pros and cons. So I want to thank you so much for being with us today, Nicole.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So let's get into the topic. I mean, what would you define as a multiple dwelling unit? I mean, I don't think it's if you have an in-law apartment, unless maybe you're renting it out to somebody else. But what is considered multi-dwelling unit?
Multi-dwelling is exactly that. It could be a duplex so that you own two halves of it and it's deeded as one property. It could be a triple decker. Obviously, those are very common in Worcester area. We can obviously go and expand to a 6 families as well, or maybe it's a condo complex or something like that nature. So it's really you buying an entire building that has multiple units that you can rent out to other people. The issue is how big do you want it and what are you going to be willing to do, because there are going to be consequences for any of this.
I mean, I've known a few people that own buildings and there is a fair amount of stress. But let's talk about the benefits first. What are some of the benefits? Is it a tax benefit? Obviously, there should be some income, hopefully, if you didn't have to put a lot of money into it. But what do you typically think the benefits are?
I mean, I think the biggest benefit is you're getting real estate. You know, real estate market is going to continue to grow. How quickly, I don't know, but it's going to be your largest asset you most likely own, and it grows. I mean, most properties in Worcester over the last 5 years have almost doubled in value. So just that alone is humongous, right? Now we have the benefit of, hey, look, the mortgage is $2,000 a month. I charge $2,000 a month and I have 3 units. Great. I'm making a profit of $4,000 a month. Now, again, that's just on the face of it, but those are the types of things that you're really going to be benefiting long-term in terms of being able to get some money in your pocket monthly, as well as paying all of your bills associated with that property, and then hopefully getting a gross income when you sell it at some point.
I mean, that all sounds great. There are utilities involved. I mean, is it typically that everyone puts the utilities in their own name, or are there some utilities that you could charge them for?
That really depends on the unit. First and foremost, if you're going to charge a tenant for utilities, they need to have a separate meter, a separate line, a separate something. If you have, the electric bill, there better be 3 meters if it's a triple decker. If you don't, you're going to be in trouble. And in reality, you're probably looking at 4 meters. Why? Because the common area has to be your responsibility. So there's things that you're going to pay, but again, that common area is what? The sensor lights that come on when somebody walks up to the 3rd floor, the exterior lights when somebody comes on. Again, it's going to be nominal in comparison, maybe a basement, but those are the things you're going to need to make sure that you have separate meters, separate units for each floor. You're not going to most likely be able to include water because it has to be a high efficiency property and you have to get a certificate. And most people don't want to be bothered with it because tenants will come in and put it in the rain shower instead. And now it's no longer high efficiency. So there's things like that you'd want to stay away from. But again, you're going to overall add that into the cost of the expenses for the household. So yes, you can add utilities. Yes, you should consult with an attorney to make sure that you're doing everything right. And obviously you should talk to the utility companies directly and make sure they have the right number of units for this dwelling, including your own.
What about real estate taxes? Can you charge them for the real estate taxes, or do you have to take care of that?
You are going to absorb the real estate cost. Again, you're going to absorb that through a tenancy So the tenant's going to be paying you whatever that amount of money is. I shouldn't say nominal at all, but they're going to be paying you that amount of money, and then you're going to be applying that toward your mortgage, toward your real estate taxes, toward your homeowner's insurance, toward the water bill. So those are things that are going to be included. The only way you can get out of that is if it was a commercial property, but not for residential use.
That makes sense. So let me ask you this, the repairs. Like, you really should set aside money for repairs because things come up. And when you've got a building, that just multiplies really fast.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, you want to have that rainy day fund. Whether you're an owner just for yourself or you're renting it out to other people, you need to make sure that you understand your obligations. You have to make those repairs. A boiler breaks, the roof leaks. You're going to window breaks because it was a tornado. Who knows? But you're going to have all of these things that may or may not be attributed to the tenant, but you certainly have a responsibility to make those repairs, and you have a responsibility to make those repairs timely. God forbid a pipe leaks and now you've got units flooded. And if it's multiple units, guess what? That can be very costly. So, hopefully you're going to hire somebody to address those issues. But more importantly, you need to deal with the immediate thing of, I need to get this fixed. And sometimes it's not waiting for your insurance company because it needs to be fixed now. You have tenants and you have an obligation to them to give them a habitable property. So again, hopefully you can do at least some kind of, fix in the short term, but long term, you're going to have to come up with that large sum of money.
And that's too bad when those things creep up on you. I mean, there's just like little daily things that you have to deal with as well. I mean, the winter is such a pain in the butt with the snow and making sure everything is safe and that people aren't slipping and falling and suing you later. I mean, do you see a lot of lawsuits in the winter time?
I see more ability. Generally speaking, the tenants will complain about that. The real question is whether or not there's an actual injury. And I don't mean to be coy about it, but the reality is people do lie. And guess what? They know that they're renting and the landlord owns, so they must have more money than me. That's the logic, right? So again, if they go, well, maybe if I slip and fall, if you will, and I can get some money, sometimes that's what they're doing. And hopefully that's not really what's happening, but that's why you have insurance. That's why you have investigations. That's why they have the entire process. Your job is to go, okay, I'm hiring somebody, or I know, or I have those exterior cameras and I can show that the property was clean and dry and there was no ice down. I can tell you that they didn't actually even fall. So there's ways that we can overcome those situations. But yes, unfortunately, as a homeowner, whether you rent or own, guess what? You're going to be responsible for that.
That liability can sure be a headache.
Absolutely.
So one of the major ones, and one of the first things people think of is, what if the tenant doesn't pay?
Well, if the tenant doesn't pay, you can always send them out a 14-day notice to quit, which is for non-payment of rent. They do have an ability to cure it, which is to pay it. And obviously your goal is to get them to pay it. So there is an option. And if they continue not to pay it, then what's going to end up happening is you will take them into court under summary process complaint, and ultimately the court will make a decision as to when they need to vacate or what amount of money they owe and how they're going to pay that money back.
That's everyone's worst nightmare though, isn't it? I mean, does it take a really long time to get rid of people? I mean, I personally had a client do that to me, and trying to get rid of her was really difficult. And I actually won in small claims court representing myself, but then she went and declared bankruptcy. So, I mean, that stuff happens. I mean, what's typically the process and how long does it take?
The process, well, that's a hard question. It's overall a quick process. So you serve the notice to quit, you wait for that to expire, then you serve the summary process, then you'll have a tier 1 hearing with the court, and then if you can't resolve it at the tier 1, then you go to trial. So that overall process is going to take you probably 2.5 to 3 months on average. The real question is, again, what's going to get accomplished? Are you going to get all of your money up front? Are they going to be applying for subsidized income? What's going on in their lives And how is it going to affect you? Maybe they're never going to pay you and they're just going to continue to try to stay there for longer. So that's kind of the norm of where we're at. The real question is, again, whether or not they have the resources to pay you in the future. If they do, then great, you're probably going to let them stay. But if they habitually pay late, then it's a little bit harder, because you really just want them out, because you know that, great, they're caught up this month, but next month you're going to have to go through the same process again, and you don't want to have to deal with it for another 3 months. So it does get very tiring. Overall, again, you're probably looking at an average of 3 to 4 months, but it could be up to a year. And that's, unfortunately, you've got to deal with that. Thankfully, the COVID rules don't apply anymore, but when they did, we were looking at 2 years.
I mean, like, we needed our job made more difficult, right? And that's why you need an attorney, because it's going to take a lot longer. It's going to cost you a lot more money if you don't have someone that knows the process that can help you out with the right strategy. I'm sure you see people botch this by trying to do it themselves all the time.
That is an understatement. People should not be doing this alone. It's one of those things that, even as an attorney, I would probably hire another attorney to represent me if I had multifamilies. There's so many nuances. There's so many issues that can come up. It gets very emotional. You're talking about, oh, this is my house. Well, no, it's not really your house. You're renting it out from me. And then as a landlord, you're like, I just need you out. Sometimes I care about the money. A lot of times I don't care about the money. I just need my property back. So again, those tensions get very high, and it gets very contentious very quickly.
I mean, sometimes there's kids and pets and all kinds of things involved. And speaking of that, I'm sure that one of the things that you get a lot of is, geez, my tenant just moved out and trashed the place, and it's going to cost me more than they paid in rent to fix it. What happens when they destroy your property?
Well, the only good thing about that scenario is you just said they got out. So you can breathe a sigh of relief, because guess what? It's over with. I get where you are, but it's better than when they're in there and they're breaking things every week, and then you're paying for the repairs and the repairs and the repairs and the repairs that are being caused by them. So you have to look at the bright side of that. Now, obviously, you're going to have to assess the damages. You're going to have to hire somebody, get an assessment on it. Hopefully you have a security deposit. Maybe you have last month's rent. Maybe you don't have any of that stuff. But obviously, if you do have a security deposit, as long as you apply it accordingly and you send off the documentation within that 30 days as required, and all other compliances are met, then at least you'll get to keep that money up to the amount of the damages. Now, obviously, the problem really becomes, I don't have a security deposit, or they damaged it well beyond the security deposit and there's $10,000 worth of damages. That happens as well. And unfortunately, your remedy is going to be to file a lawsuit against them. So you can file a small claims action against them, asking for the damages, or obviously if it's that high, you'd have to file in district court. But generally, you can file up to $7,000 in housing court or in small claims. So that's your best remedy to get recourse. The problem is, you need to know their new address. So if you don't know their new address when they moved out, that's going to create another problem there.
That is so interesting. That also happened to me, and I had to track somebody down. I mean, you and I were working together on me buying a commercial property. And one of the things that really surprised me was that you go into some of these properties and you find a lot of damage, a lot of things that need to be fixed. Some things can be pretty serious. There was a leaky roof in this case, and they had a tenant. And I mean, you would think, okay, so I'm going to buy this for my own business, and the tenant will leave in a certain amount of time. And one of your comments was, well, that depends on how much you pay her to get out. And it wasn't even my property yet, but because the other owner didn't want to kick this person out, it was going to be my responsibility. And I ultimately didn't take the property because of the damages and the unseen damages that I thought might be there, because of a leaky roof is serious. But also because it sounded like it was going to be a real pain in the butt to get rid of this person.
Absolutely. And that's one of those things that you have to look at. If you're buying a property, whether it's residential or commercial, you want to look at the lease. You want to get an estoppel certificate. You want to have a rent roll. Those are things that are very important when you're buying this property, to look at that stuff, really digest it and figure out what you have, because maybe you have somebody that just moved in last month and they've got a year lease and now you've got 11 months with them. They might be a nightmare because obviously the other person doesn't necessarily know. He's only had to deal with them for a month and he got first, last, and security, so you run into those risks. And again, what if they are a bad tenant and they know how to play the system, and then they're going to continue to live there for a year because they're paying their rent, but they're torturing you in other ways. They're torturing you by destroying the property, but you can't prove it. They're torturing you by not giving you access so that you can make repairs. They're torturing you in all other ways, or better yet, they're torturing the other tenants that are in the building. So you run that risk of these people not being good and you being stuck with them because they have rights. So you really want to weigh that risk overall. And again, it's on a case by case, and you really have to do your due diligence and look at the documentation. Look at what they have. Show me their payment history for the last year. Show me their rental application. You're entitled to all that if you ask for it, but most people don't ask for it.
Oh, I remember you even asking me for to find out if they had a deposit that would go to us if we had bought the place. So I wouldn't have thought to ask that, and that could have saved me a lot of money. In fact, I almost think walking away from a bad deal, because you have a good person who asks the right questions on your side, who knows the law, it just saves you a lot of headaches, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars of headaches later on, depending on what goes wrong. And sometimes it's just as good to find out what could go wrong as it is to, buy a property that you think is worth a lot, and then later on it's like the money pit.
Absolutely. And I think that's one thing that sets me aside from a lot of real estate attorneys, because they, don't go into court if there's problems. B, they have no idea about landlord-tenant law. And then what they do know is what they found in a book. But again, they're not going to go into court, so they really don't know what the outcomes are. I go into court. I know these situations. I see this happen on a regular basis. So I've got a leg up against those other real estate attorneys that don't know any of this stuff.
Absolutely. So if you are thinking of buying some real estate or multiple dwelling units and you just have questions, please give Nicole and her team a call. They are amazing at what they do, and they know great strategies to help you get a great outcome. And sometimes the best outcome is to walk away. So it's always good to know that before, running headlong into something that could be a really big mistake in your life. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, Nicole. I feel like so many of our interviews save people hundreds of thousands of dollars in the long run. And a call to you and your team will definitely save a lot more. So if you need her, please give her a call. And thanks again for being on the show, Nicole.
Thanks for having me.
You are welcome, and have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks for watching.